Rafael Vargas built an empire in silence. Silvio Moretta destroyed it in blood. Clyde Jesper tried to save it with logic, and Liana Vex vanished with its deepest secrets. What began as a cartel's rise to power turned into a deadly game of betrayal, revenge, and disappearance, leaving behind a trail of bodies and a mystery no one has fully solved. This is the story of how four names changed the criminal underworld forever. In the quiet, sun-drenched town of Madera, California, where the fields stretched endlessly and life moved at a slow pace, no one suspected that the roots of one of America's deadliest drug mafias were quietly growing beneath the surface. It began with Rafael Vargas, a man who had once labored on those very farms, picking grapes under the blistering heat. But Rafael was not like the others. He had ambition carved into his bones and patience molded by years of silence. With sharp instincts and a cold sense of calculation, he saw opportunity where others only saw survival. At first, Rafael moved small amounts of methamphetamine across county lines using produced trucks. The shipments were clean, clever, and too insignificant to raise alarms. But within 3 years, the tiny operation morphed into a multi-million-dollar syndicate. Rafael never used a phone, never spoke in meetings, and never trusted anyone outside a tight circle of men who owed their lives to him. By 2013, the Vargas cartel had spread beyond California into Arizona, Nevada, and Oregon. With each state came new faces and new blood, each more ruthless than the last. Silvio Moretta was the face of Arizona. An ex-Marine with a sharp tongue and a violent streak, he managed the desert routes and border smuggling operations. In Oregon, Rafael chose Clyde Jesper, a quiet but intelligent man with a background in logistics and a cold efficiency that made him valuable. For Nevada, he trusted Nico Salazar, a flashy and unpredictable nightclub owner who used his Las Vegas connections to wash cartel money through poker tournaments, entertainment venues, and strip clubs. Together, they formed the backbone of the Vargas empire. But beneath the cartel's surface success was a slow corrosion of loyalty. The lieutenants had grown rich, powerful, and increasingly independent. Rafael's command began to feel more like tradition than authority. While Rafael remained invisible in the shadows of California, his lieutenants were living lavishly, drawing attention and making enemies. It started subtly. Small shipments began disappearing from the Arizona route. When questioned, Silvio blamed Border Patrol crackdowns, but others suspected foul play. In Las Vegas, 2 of Nico's men were found dead in a warehouse, their bodies riddled with bullets and stripped of identification. Clyde, who prided himself on order and control, began pulling back operations from Portland to prevent infiltration. Rumors of betrayal circulated like wildfire, but no one dared point fingers directly. Rafael didn't react publicly. He remained silent, cold, and watchful. He knew something had shifted within his empire, and in his world, silence meant war was near. The first real sign of collapse came with the disappearance of an entire shipment in Arizona valued at over $8 million. Silvio claimed it was an ambush, but the details didn't add up. Surveillance footage showed no signs of attack. The driver vanished without a trace. No bodies, no calls, no ransom. Rafael sent 2 of his most trusted enforcers from California to investigate. Within days, both were found executed near the New Mexico border, their tongues cut out and their fingers broken. It was more than murder. It was a message. Someone within the cartel had made a move, and that move had just turned a criminal empire into a ticking time bomb. The FBI, meanwhile, began noticing unusual activity. Drug busts that led to dead ends, informants that suddenly disappeared, and intercepted calls filled with cryptic references to something called collapse. They didn't know who started it or what it meant, but they knew something was building, something organized, massive, and far more deadly than they had encountered in years. Back in Madera, Rafael stopped attending even his private meetings. He retreated to an unknown location, communicating only through silent emissaries. His disappearance shook the core of the organization. Without the presence of the man who built the empire, the lieutenants began posturing for power. Each believed they were the natural successor. Each prepared in secret. What none of them realized was that Rafael was not gone. He was watching, waiting, and letting them make the first move. And when they did, he would strike not to regain power, but to destroy everything he once built, just to bury his enemies in the ashes. In the dry, scorching heat of Arizona's borderlands, the Vargas cartel's silent war began to boil. It was 2016 when a major drug bust in Yuma caught national headlines. Nearly 12 million worth of methamphetamine was discovered hidden in crates of imported citrus fruits. Local authorities celebrated it as a win. What they didn't know was that the entire operation had been compromised from the inside. Silvio Moretta, the cartel's Arizona chief, had orchestrated the bust himself, not as a mistake, but as a strategic betrayal. Silvio had grown disillusioned with Rafael Vargas's leadership. He believed that the cartel was wasting potential under Rafael's cautious and silent rule. Silvio wanted expansion, wanted power, and most of all, he wanted to lead. The bust in Yuma wasn't a failure. It was a warning shot. Silvio leaked the drop location to a corrupt customs officer who had been secretly working for him. In return, Silvio ensured his own supply lines remained untouched, and more importantly, he removed rival foot soldiers from Rafael's inner circle who had been watching him too closely. The fallout was immediate. Suspicion rose quickly in California and Nevada, but Rafael, as always, gave no public reaction. He remained hidden and offered no orders. The silence was deafening. Silvio took this as a green light. With one threat removed, he turned his attention to Nico Salazar in Las Vegas. Nico had always been the wild card. He thrived on chaos, preferred to be seen, and had a tendency to act without thinking. Silvio saw him as a liability and an obstacle. Weeks after the Yuma incident, Nico was found dead in his penthouse suite above a casino. His body lay sprawled across the floor, his throat cut cleanly from ear to ear. A single photograph of Rafael Vargas, marked with an X, had been stabbed into his chest with a switchblade. It was a chilling message, brutal and personal. Nico's murder sent shockwaves through the cartel. No one claimed responsibility, but whispers pointed toward Silvio. His rise in Arizona had been too sudden, too well-timed, yet no one dared confront him. With Rafael silent and Nico dead, the power vacuum grew. Clyde Jesper in Oregon, who had always stayed detached from the bloodshed, began taking measures to protect his end. He shut down secondary operations, rerouted transport schedules, and started purging personnel with even the slightest links to Arizona. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. Clyde had sensed that this wasn't a one-time betrayal. Silvio was planning something deeper. He wanted total control of the Vargas empire, and the only people standing in his way were Clyde and the Ghost, like Rafael. With Vegas under his influence and Arizona fully under his grip, Silvio set his sights north. The FBI, meanwhile, began intercepting fragments of cartel communication. Codewords like shift, tower, and collapse appeared again and again in voice and text transmissions. There was movement, fast, aggressive, and without Rafael's signature methods. The violence was no longer subtle. Bodies began appearing in ditches outside Tucson. Burned cars littered the outskirts of Henderson, and police stations reported sudden increases in cartel-related homicides. Despite the chaos, Rafael remained in the shadows. Some said he was dead, others claimed he had fled the country. But the cartel's inner circle knew better. Rafael had built the empire in silence, and silence was his strategy once again. But no one knew where he was or what he was planning. Then came the hit in Portland. A known distributor associated with Clyde Jesper was found executed inside a storage unit. The scene was grisly. Hands nailed to the floor, eyes gouged, and a carved M across his forehead. It was a method unfamiliar to Oregon authorities, but not to cartel insiders. It was Silvio's message. He wasn't just expanding, he was declaring war. Clyde responded with quiet fury. Unlike Silvio, he didn't seek chaos. He hired independent contract killers from Eastern Europe and launched a silent counteroffensive. Over the next few months, several of Silvio's mid-level captains vanished. Some were found dead, others never resurfaced. It was surgical, professional, and effective. But Silvio was quick to adapt. In a move that stunned even his closest men, he captured Clyde's younger brother, Jeremy Jesper, a civilian with no ties to the cartel. Jeremy was tortured, filmed, and left in a field outside Phoenix. The footage was sent to Clyde with a single line: step down or burn. The video broke whatever peace had remained. The cartel, once ruled by one man's quiet control, was now splitting apart violently. Arizona and Oregon were engulfed in a covert turf war, and the FBI could barely keep up. But the man who had started it all, Rafael Vargas, still hadn't made his move. Not yet. He was waiting for the right moment. And when he returned, it wouldn't be to rebuild. It would be to eliminate. By early 2017, with Nico Salazar dead and Clyde Jesper devastated by the public torture of his brother, the once cohesive Vargas cartel was now an empire crumbling from the inside. The silent purge had begun. No declarations, no announcements, only bodies, disappearances, and chaos. While Arizona's Silvio Moreta basked in the bloodshed, believing he had cleared his path to full control, others in the network were quietly planning their exits or plotting revenge. Rafael Vargas, long absent and presumed dead by outsiders, remained hidden, observing. He watched as the very foundation he built began to collapse under the weight of ego and betrayal. His rule had always been grounded in discipline, discretion, and fear. Now, the new generation of leaders sought fame, visibility, and violence. Rafael knew that once order was lost, it would take destruction to rebuild it. In Oregon, Clyde Jesper, once the quiet and methodical planner, was now a man driven by grief and revenge. The death of his brother had transformed him. No longer content with defense, Clyde began orchestrating his own brand of retaliation. But instead of waging a public war like Silvio, he opted for quiet retribution. Clyde hired a team of international operatives with no ties to the cartel, no loyalty, and no mercy. Their first strike came in Phoenix. 3 of Silvio's key enforcers were gunned down in broad daylight outside a strip mall. The precision of the attack was military-grade, with no casualties beyond the targets and no fingerprints left behind. The cartel community was stunned. This wasn't a message, it was an execution. Then came the second wave. In Tucson, a warehouse known for storing fentanyl precursors exploded in flames. No survivors, no evidence. The loss was massive, financially and structurally. Silvio responded with fury. In retaliation, he kidnapped 2 logistics men from Oregon, had them tortured, and dumped their bodies near a train yard in Albuquerque. Their faces were disfigured, their hands chopped off. The message was unmistakable. It was war now, with no return. Meanwhile, California remained oddly silent. What used to be the heart of Rafael's empire now operated in shadows, unclear who was running it. Some believed Rafael had appointed a new second, in command. Others believed he was back, pulling strings from the background. But no one had seen him. The vacuum of leadership in California created instability. Smaller groups began forming within the state, rogue cells eager to claim territory, loot warehouses, and rise through the cracks of a fractured syndicate. The FBI, DA, and local law enforcement noticed the shift. Homicide rates tied to cartel activity spiked. Between March and July of 2017, 12 high-ranking operatives from Arizona and Oregon were murdered in 5 different states. Surveillance revealed patterns, but no names. The agencies started calling it the silent collapse. In Oregon, Clyde grew more reclusive, rarely appearing in public, even avoiding his own men. He trusted no one. He moved from safe house to safe house, constantly rotating locations. But Silvio was watching, waiting for a mistake. That mistake came in the form of a woman, a low-level courier who had once worked for Clyde and had quietly switched sides after being caught stealing from a shipment. Her name was Inez, and she offered Silvio what no one else could access. In late October, Clyde received a tip that his brother's remaining possessions had been found in a storage facility near Flagstaff. Against his better judgment, he went. What he didn't know was that the entire setup had been planned. He was captured as he arrived, ambushed by 4 masked men who injected him with a sedative and transported him across state lines. Silvio had him taken to a remote bunker deep in the desert, far from prying eyes. Clyde's death wasn't quick. It was slow, methodical, and symbolic. Silvio recorded every moment of it, sending the footage through encrypted cartel channels with a simple caption: "One down." Clyde's death broke Oregon's operations entirely. His men scattered, some surrendering to law enforcement, others fleeing the country. With both Nico and Clyde gone, and California's silence still looming, Silvio saw himself as the last man standing. He began restructuring the cartel under his own name, replacing Rafael's branding with his own insignia, removing portraits, and issuing new protocols. He declared Arizona the new command center and offered old allies a choice: join him or vanish. But his victory was premature. While Silvio consolidated power, Rafael Vargas was preparing his return. No longer interested in preserving the empire, Rafael's focus was now destruction. He didn't want to lead again. He wanted to end it all. And deep in the mountains of Montana, with a new identity and a team of his own, Rafael was planning something far more brutal than anyone had imagined. The year was 2018, and while the rest of the country believed the Vargas cartel was disintegrating under the weight of its own violence, Rafael Vargas quietly resurfaced. He had been hiding in the remote wilderness of Montana, living under a false name in a cabin, surrounded by forest and silence. He had watched from a distance as Silvio Moretta turned the empire into a blood-soaked kingdom. But Rafael wasn't returning to claim the throne. He was coming back to end the game entirely. Years of hiding had changed Rafael. He no longer had the need to control territory or oversee shipments. His wealth was untouched, stored in untraceable offshore accounts and buried caches across the West. What he wanted now was revenge. Revenge for the betrayal, for the lives lost, and for the monster his creation had become. He no longer cared about rebuilding. His only mission was to erase Silvio and every trace of the empire they once ruled together. Rafael's return wasn't loud. He didn't reach out to old allies or recruit from within the cartel. Instead, he turned to a small group of foreign mercenaries, disconnected from the cartel world, but experts in destruction. Each had a background in black ops, and each one was handpicked. Rafael gave them one directive: dismantle Silvio's network, piece by piece, and do it in a way that would send fear through every corner of the criminal world. The first strike came quietly. A fentanyl lab in Nogales exploded in the dead of night, reducing the entire facility and everyone inside to ash. 2 weeks later, a weapons cache in Prescott was found emptied, its guards found dead with their eyes removed and left lined up in a row. The killings were precise, theatrical, and eerily silent, just like Rafael had always operated. Silvio initially believed it was law enforcement, but the brutality didn't match federal operations. This was personal. Then came the real message. One of Silvio's main financiers, a corrupt city official named Edwin Clay, was found hanging from a freeway overpass with a single name carved into his chest: Vargas. The photo went viral across private cartel channels. Silvio, now ruling Arizona with an iron grip, began to feel something he hadn't in years: fear. He went underground, abandoning his opulent Tosin estate and moving between secured compounds. He increased his security, executed suspected informants, and halted all major drug shipments to avoid further exposure. But none of it helped. Rafael's men didn't need volume. They targeted structure. Within months, supply routes crumbled, warehouses were burned, and Silvio's income dried up. More importantly, his alliances began to dissolve. Without money or product, loyalty evaporated. Silvio attempted to strike back. He sent a kill team into Montana after intercepting a vague lead about Rafael's location. But they found nothing except a decoy cabin rigged with explosives. 3 men died in the blast. Another was later found strangled in a motel outside Billings with a note pinned to his chest: "Try harder." Rafael was not just attacking the organization. He was attacking Silvio's psyche. Every move made him more paranoid, more reckless. His inner circle shrank until it consisted of only 3 trusted men. But even they had started to question him. The violence, once a tool, had become an obsession. Silvio began lashing out, killing anyone who voiced doubt, and refusing to sleep in the same place 2 nights in a row. In a final act of desperation, Silvio retreated to a hidden mountain cabin in Utah, a place only known to his closest allies. It was remote, cold, and fortified. He believed he would be safe there, but Rafael had already found it. He didn't use bullets or fire this time. Instead, his men poisoned the cabin's water system. Slow, silent, and invisible. Silvio and his guards died within 2 days, their bodies found curled in pain, foam dried on their lips. No blood, no gunfire, no sign of struggle, just silence. The kind Rafael preferred. The news didn't make national headlines. The bodies were discovered by hikers weeks later. Authorities couldn't connect them to any known cartel figure. But inside the criminal underworld, word spread quickly. Silvio Moretta was dead, and Rafael Vargas had returned not to rebuild an empire, but to bury it. The Vargas cartel, once a powerful multi-state network, had been reduced to ashes. But with its destruction came new questions. Who would fill the void? Would Rafael vanish again? And most disturbingly, had he truly ended it? Or was something darker about to begin? By early 2019, with Silvio Moretta dead and the Vargas cartel in ruins, law enforcement across the western United States intensified efforts to locate Rafael Vargas. His name, once whispered in fear by cartel lieutenants, was now at the center of every inter-agency task force meeting. The empire he'd created had left behind a trail of death, drugs, and destruction stretching across 4 states. But what puzzled federal agents the most was Rafael's motive. He had destroyed his own empire with surgical precision, and yet, unlike most cartel leaders, he had made no attempt to reclaim the throne. Instead of building something new, he vanished once again. While local and federal agencies scrambled to make sense of the chaos, a new name began to surface. Liana Vex, a woman with no previous criminal record, no history of arrests, and no visible ties to any known gangs. But when authorities raided an abandoned luxury property in Nevada linked to cartel activity, Liana's fingerprints were found on encrypted cell phones, burner laptops, and ledgers listing shipment routes, payout schedules, and safe house coordinates. She had been in the background the entire time, unseen but deeply embedded. Investigators soon discovered that Liana had been Rafael's closest confidante during his time in Montana. She wasn't just a messenger or handler, she was the strategist. While Rafael orchestrated destruction, Liana had managed logistics, covered tracks, and funneled assets into secure accounts. Her real specialty was concealment, using fake identities and shell companies. She ensured that nothing could be traced back to Rafael directly. Authorities arrested Liana in Colorado while she was boarding a private charter plane. In her possession were 3 satellite phones, 2 passports, and a small suitcase containing over $250,000 in cash. The DEA believed she was preparing to flee the country. During interrogation, Liana said little, but what she did offer shocked even the most experienced agents. She agreed to cooperate in exchange for full immunity and protective custody. What she provided was a blueprint of the cartel's fall, detailed accounts of how each strike against Silvio's network was planned, financed, and executed. Her testimony and digital evidence led to the arrest of 36 individuals tied to the cartel's operations in California, Oregon, and Arizona. Warehouses were seized, bank accounts frozen, and weapons caches dismantled. For the first time in over a decade, the government believed the Vargas cartel had been fully dismantled. News outlets praised the unprecedented cooperation between federal agencies. But behind closed doors, agents knew things still didn't make sense. Why had Rafael spared Liana? Why had he allowed her to hold the keys to everything? And most importantly, where was he now? In late 2020, the final clue surfaced. A confidential informant in Idaho claimed to have seen a man matching Rafael's description living on a remote farm outside Coeur d'Alene. Authorities moved swiftly. When they arrived, they found Rafael alone, unarmed, and seated at a kitchen table. He didn't resist arrest. He didn't speak. He simply nodded, as if he had been waiting for them. Rafael was charged with dozens of federal crimes, including conspiracy, drug trafficking, and murder. But in court, he maintained the same silence that had defined his reign. During his trial, Liana Vex was set to testify as the key witness. Her protection detail was tripled, and security was heightened. But just days before the first hearing, she vanished. The last confirmed sighting of Liana was security footage from a Denver hotel. She entered her room alone and never came out. There was no forced entry, no signs of a struggle, and no calls from her phone. She was simply gone. Her disappearance shook the entire case. Without her testimony, prosecutors were forced to rely on digital evidence and secondary witnesses. Though still strong, the case lost its foundation. Rafael was eventually sentenced to life in a maximum security prison without the possibility of parole. Yet many believed it wasn't justice, it was containment. To this day, the full extent of Rafael's plan remains unknown. Some agents believe Liana escaped, using one of the many escape routes she had helped design. Others believe Rafael orchestrated her disappearance from behind bars. There's even a theory that she was never caught at all, and the woman arrested was someone else entirely. Another illusion in a long line of misdirection. The Vargas cartel may be gone, but its legacy remains. Hundreds of millions in drug profits were never recovered. Several high-ranking operatives were never located. And the question still lingers, did Rafael truly lose, or did he choose his end to mask a deeper truth? Inside the prison walls, Rafael speaks to no one. But every now and then, a letter arrives at an unknown location. No return address, no signature. Just a black mark at the bottom of the page. A symbol only Liana would understand. The war may be over, but the story is far from finished.